you've made a great difference in his life. Yeah.
I got to tell him though, he's going to help me and Mom read because I know what to do with that.
He'll come back.
Meeting will come to order. Welcome to an informational meeting with Kinder Morgan, and I stress the point of informational. If you're here for any other reason than to have questions answered, we might want to just leave now. Kinder Morgan will present for a half hour, and then we'll have questions for the last half hour. We have very limited time, so David will have you write questions down so that we don't have duplication. And please be respectful of any speakers. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair and Board of Selectmen. My name is Alan Ford with Kinder Morgan, and joining me tonight are Mark Hamrick, our project manager, and Jim Parkman, our land manager. What we want to do tonight is talk to you a little bit about our company, a little bit about our project and where we are in the process of planning this project, what the next steps are, and what you can plan on seeing over the next several months as we develop a new natural gas energy infrastructure project for Massachusetts and New England. About our company, we are a transportation and storage company, and we are in the business of transporting energy products. This is a copy of our natural gas map. This is about 70,000 miles of natural gas pipe throughout most of the United States. And the TGP, the Tennessee Gas System, is the transportation system that transports natural gas into New England. The natural gas is primarily coming into New England from the Marcellus Shale region. You can see back to this map, in the past, a lot of natural gas came from this part of the country, in the Gulf region, from these different shale places. These are all shale deposits and places where energy is in the United States. But now, primarily transporting from the Marcellus Shale region into New England, primarily because of the plentiful nature of natural gas in that area and the proximity to New England. It's less distance of transportation. So this is our Tennessee gas system. Remember the map of the 70,000 miles. Now we're breaking it down to about a 13,000 mile system that transports natural gas into the region. This system serves about 35 million households. That's natural gas supplied to household equivalents, and has access to the significant shale supply areas in the region. But we're focusing here on the Marcellus Shale because that's primarily where the product is coming from. So this system has been in existence for many, many years, 50 years plus in the region. And what we're talking about for purposes of the project tonight, the Northeast Expansion Project, is an expansion of an existing system. And we'll talk to you a little more about that. So Tennessee Gas has been delivering gas to New England for many years. These are some of the companies that currently are customers of ours. We're a transportation company. We don't drill the gas. We don't sell the gas to homeowners and businesses. We ship the gas to local distribution companies, others who eventually provide the gas to their customer base, which is homes and businesses. But these are a list of companies. You may be familiar with some of these. This is just showing that we have done business in the area for a long time and are in the business of servicing New England. In Massachusetts, we have about 600 miles of pipe. So if you think about that 13,000 mile Tennessee gas system, this is the piece that's in New Hampshire. It's called our 200 line system, and this is currently delivering gas to various markets throughout the state. And some other stats about our company, about 46 employees in the payroll, and the taxes we paid in 2013 in the state. And these are the counties that we currently do business in the state. So a long time presence here in Massachusetts. So about the project that would potentially impact the Warwick area. Why are we pursuing this project? Why are we looking at building and expanding our current infrastructure system in the state? Well, it's in response to what has been deemed by many as an infrastructure crisis for the Northeast, particularly for New England. And the limits on current pipeline capacity from a natural gas perspective to supply the New England area. So these are some of the headlines that came out in the last heating season that we're just getting out of, the last winter season, where there simply wasn't enough supply to meet demand, not enough infrastructure to deliver to customers. So this was highlighted in some letters. This is an example of the letter to the U.S. Secretary of Energy from some of the U.S. senators in the region, talking about New England being at risk for disruptions in service because of limited pipeline supply. So we're the pipeline company that delivers, and we're one of the largest, one of the two major distributors of natural gas to the region, and our pipeline system and other systems aren't enough. So we need additional infrastructure. This is what others are saying. Not Kinder Morgan saying this, is what others are saying needs to be done. The governors of the New England region, all of the governors in New England, also signed on to a statement talking about the need for additional natural gas pipelines. This is their words, asking how are we going to deal with this crisis in the future? And companies like Kinder Morgan are addressing those needs by proposing projects to address the natural gas limitations to the region. So natural gas is becoming, and why is this? Why is there a crisis? Because there's more reliance on natural gas. There's less reliance on coal and nuclear energy, switching to natural gas, so more need for natural gas is limiting and putting constraints on the system to get natural gas to market. So we're talking about 60% of that, potentially up to 92% of that, coming from this shale region in the Northeast. So this demand is going to continue to grow, and the need for natural gas is going to continue to grow. So how do you deal with that? You look at projects that could potentially deal with that, and that's expanding current systems, building new infrastructure, and that's what we're talking about. So this is a map, you saw this a little bit before, but this is a map of our current system, the black line. What we're talking about is expanding our system by building from Wright, New York to around the Richmond area, and that's this purple line coming into Massachusetts, constructing a new pipeline system to service the region. So this is a project that's about 250 miles long in total, if you're doing our main line and our laterals, about 250 miles long. And we're very early on in the exploration stages of the project. I want to make sure everyone understands what that means, early stages of the project. That means we haven't filed for permits. We haven't decided we're going to pursue the project. We are simply exploring the interest in this project for our customers. What that means is local distribution companies, some of the companies I listed on the previous slide, do they have interest in additional natural gas supply? And if they do, they need to be willing to sign up for firm long-term contracts with our company to reserve space on this pipeline. Because this is a big pipeline infrastructure project that could approach $2 to $3 to $4 billion if all the components of it are put together. And that's a private investment by Kinder Morgan. So if we're going to do that, we need to be assured that the actual customer interest that we think is out there actually is. So that's the process that we're in right now, exploring the commercial interest in that project. So if that commercial interest is secured, then we will begin an extensive permitting and review process. So we're really at this step right here. And if you look at the opposite end here, we're talking about a project, if we pursue it, that wouldn't be completed until the fourth quarter of 2018, with construction activity not beginning until the first quarter of 2017. So there's a long, extensive review process before this project. If we decide to pursue it, if we decide to file for permits, which we'd probably do in the fourth quarter of 2014, then this whole review process would begin, which allows for extensive public comment and input and review, and lots of participation in the process. So tonight is a very preliminary meeting to a potential project. So to be clear, we haven't decided we're going to pursue this. We're taking a very close look at it. We're confident that we will, but we haven't made that decision yet. We certainly haven't filed for any permits, which is coming up in the future. And that goes back to the routing process too. We haven't settled on a final route. We're still refining and exploring a proposed route, which we'll take a look at in a minute. but that is in development as well. So the project, if we go forward, could potentially serve up to an additional 1.5 million households, and also will bring in significant new tax revenue to the taxing bodies throughout Massachusetts. We pay about $5 million a year now. That would increase another $25 million on top of the $5 million. Those are our current estimates. So the project itself is regulated by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. So this process that I mentioned about this timeline here is primarily based upon the regulatory authority at FERC. And this presentation, by the way, we can make it available for a website, or whomever might want to access it. We can certainly send it to you, and you can distribute it as you see fit. So I know I'm going through the slides fast, so you'll have a chance to look at them, everyone here, on your own. But these are some of the agencies that have extensive oversight over the project. The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission is the lead agency. They regulate interstate natural gas pipelines, and that's what this project is. But also with permitting authority are these agencies, and many state agencies as well. So the state and federal government will have a significant role, as will the conservation commissions, in the permitting and regulatory oversight of the project. And at the end of the day, the FERC will need to determine whether this project is in the public interest. The public interest is determined by a lot of factors, but including, is there a need for it? Is there a natural gas supply need for this project? Is it environmentally compatible with the FERC guidelines? And can this project be built with the standards of Massachusetts and the other states that are part of the jurisdictional area? So they'll be taking a look at that, and that will happen by the FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, which is made up of 5 commissioners appointed by the President of the United States, that will vote in an open meeting in Washington on whether the project should go forward. So that is the end of the process. Part of the process to that is extensive review, public hearings, public comment sessions, environmental impact statements, etc. So be assured that if the project does go forward, there will be extensive opportunities for public comment throughout the process. So you can see the main line map here. This is the main line. We anticipate this will probably be somewhere between a 30 and 36 inch pipeline, but there are also what we call laterals associated with it. So you see the purple line here. It's a little closer to that purple line. This is the main line. And then you have potential laterals off of it. And these are smaller lines. These could be 8, 10, 12 inches, delivering product to various potential customers. We were in Concord today talking to those folks about the Nashua lateral, which would potentially deliver natural gas up to the Hollis area. So these are based upon additional customer interest. So it's much like a big pipe getting much smaller down to going into your individual household, a small pipe that provides natural gas to households. That's how these operations work. Large transmission lines with laterals going off, ultimately delivering product to customers. These are some of the towns that potentially will be impacted. This may change as our route changes, but under current specifications and our current design, these are the towns that will be part of the review process. So the route through Franklin County, you can see here, and then a little closer as we go into Warwick. So what we're talking about here from a routing perspective is this isn't an exact route. This is what we're currently looking at as a survey corridor. And I'm sure there are some landowners in the room, and some of those have been approached for survey. So what we're doing here is we're surveying this, we're trying to survey this 400-foot wide area through here, and that's a foot survey of folks going out, environmental specialists and others going out and taking a look at the property to determine whether the route that we have identified from a preliminary basis is actually constructible. So that process will help us to determine and further refine the route. As you can see, there are jags here and curves. So it's not a straight line. We've already made adjustments to this point. We'll make further adjustments based upon those surveys. So this is about as close a map as we have right now from a large perspective, because we're talking about a survey corridor. We'll refine that as we get down a little closer and identify the specific land areas that we want to pass through. But that's what we're looking at currently. So this project is going to be constructed with union labor. We expect about 3,000 construction jobs, and those jobs will be for about 2 years during the construction process. But the real long-term benefit of a project like this is additional natural gas supply for New England, addressing those crisis situations where there are limits on supply, particularly in the cold winter months. Also, as there's more reliance on natural gas and less reliance on other fossil fuels, this serves as really a generationally addressing those long-term concerns, and that's the real benefit of a project like this. So, we do have a long-time presence in the community, and part of what we do, in addition to presentations like this, talking about our project and what we're doing, we're also participants in the community and often make donations, and we certainly will be doing that on this project, to parks and emergency services groups and others. We also have a Kinder Morgan Foundation that makes donations to schools and other entities. So if we move forward, it's a partnership. We view this as a partnership. We've had a long time presence in the area. Our team has been in the area for many, many, many years working, and we want to continue that process if we have some new construction activity in the area. And I think I'm going to...
Could you just back up 3 slides for the list of supporters? You went through that kind of quick, just a second.
Yeah, it's not a list of supporters, it's a list of folks we have briefed.
Briefed, okay.
Yeah, and again, we'll provide this to
Okay.
whomever would like it. If you want to put it on a website or anywhere else, take a look at it. These are folks we have briefed on the project, and the towns that we've done 7 presentations so far, this 7 or 8, and we'll get to a lot of other towns as well.
Thank you.
And I think I'll stop there because I know I'm sure there's a lot of questions. We want to leave plenty of time for that. We appreciate your attention.
Thank you. Okay, I have some questions here that have been sent in advance. How can New England encourage investment in gas and electric, TS&D infrastructure to address vulnerabilities, that is, cyber, physical, and climate threats in the system with flat or declining electricity?
I might need to hear that one again.
How can New England encourage investment in gas and electric, TS&D infrastructure to address vulnerabilities, that is, cyber, physical, and climate threats in the system with flat or declining electricity demand?
Well, I think that's talking about a more reliance on natural gas, and there's a policy debate that's going to happen as part of this project and others. We're not the only project out there that's attempting to address some of the natural gas needs of the region. And whether or not is natural gas the right answer? More reliance on renewables, is that the answer? Is there a combination of those two? We know that we're moving more towards domestic energy independence. 30 years ago, no one would have thought that we wouldn't be thinking about OPEC anymore. I know some of you in this room are old enough to remember OPEC, but it really was an issue where we had issues with foreign sources of energy. We don't deal with that anymore because we really are moving towards domestic energy independence. But is natural gas a bridge energy towards renewables? And how do we get there to renewables? We certainly can't do that today. We do have to, I think anyone will realistically say we've got to have a bridge before we get to the to more renewables. So we believe that we're addressing a need that the policymakers in New England have identified. I showed you the previous slides about some of the comments some of them have made. But that's part of a big policy debate. And that'll be part of the overall federal and state review of this project. And if it's deemed in the public interest, the project will go forward. We think it is, and we'll be making our case for that. But I'm sure there'll be a rigorous debate about that.
We've heard there are different construction standards used along the pipeline route for rural and high-density areas. Is this true? And if so, would you explain?
No, that's not true. The construction standards are the same. We use the same specifications. There are different techniques for cross-country pipeline and for residential construction. And there may be different pipe wall thicknesses, but the construction techniques are the same. The construction standards, I mean, are the same. The techniques may be different because you're in a tighter area across country, but the standards we go by are the same no matter where we construct rural or residential or city type.
Why won't you use existing pipelines or use a path that is along interstates?
So there has been a question about our existing pipeline. The question was about using existing pipeline infrastructure. You'll see the first part of our line here, we are co-located. So one of the things you look at when you're signing pipelines is can you co-locate with existing infrastructure that's already out there, whether it might be power lines or existing pipelines in the ground, and we do that. So for the first several miles here from Wright to right about here, roughly the Richmond area, we are co-located. Then our 200 line goes south and we're going north. So why aren't we going south? Well, the problem is with the southern line, this line was built many years ago and residential areas have come right up to the line itself. So within, right up abutting in some cases our very own right-of-way. So there's no room to construct in those areas without impacting homes. So that's something that we're not going to be doing, and very likely the regulators will not allow us to do. So we can't construct in many of those congested areas. So we do look at co-location. We try to co-locate when possible, but it's not always viable. As far as roads and roadways, co-locating with them, there are issues with that. It's not impossible to do that, and in some cases we do, but there are also issues with that. Existing right-of-way that the road may have, we have to be able to have access to that. We simply can't force our pipeline into those areas, so it would have to be with the cooperation of the transportation agencies. Safety issues, maintenance issues that are part of that, but that will be part of a overall discussion about routing that will be part of the regulatory process. For example, we'll be required to identify, when we file our application, our preferred route. Now, we think that route will be something close to what we have identified here, but we're still developing this. We'll also need to identify alternative routes, and I fully anticipate that the FERC will want us to talk about more specifically about this route and whether we can co-locate in that area. Others may bring forward additional routing options that they feel might be better suited for a project like this. So the routing piece is not finalized, it's in flux, but co-location is a part of that routing process that we're required to look at, we do look at, and we'll be looking at it further throughout the process. Also, as part of this consultation process that we're doing now, asking for survey permission, and our land agents out in the field talking to landowners and other stakeholders, we're finding areas where we may be able to adjust the route with new information that we have received. And perhaps that's a co-location issue or a route adjustment. So all of those things play into the larger picture of us getting in a route identified that we believe is constructible and permittable.
Could you just be a little more specific about the width of the right-of-way at the southern tier compared to the width of the right-of-way that's proposed here?
And good evening, folks. My name is Jim Hartman. I work in the land department. Generally, the right-of-way is based on the size of the pipe and the amount of space needed to maintain the pipe. And when we have a co-location, you get some overlap, which is the advantage to co-location. But you still need, for instance, on a larger pipe, and I'm speaking generalities, 24-inch and up, approximately 50 feet for a permanent right-of-way. And a pipe that's smaller than that is generally 30 feet for a permanent right-of-way. However, for construction, we recognize that it takes more space than that, for instance, 50 feet to construct the pipeline. So there's also temporary workspace that's used for construction, and then that reverts back to the owner after we're done. And that space varies depending upon, again, size of pipe, topography, whether there's streams or roads that would require an increased temporary workspace or size of construction footprint. Does that help?
The audience will please refrain from speaking out. If you have a question, raise your hand and hold your questions until the end. How do you propose to address environmental impact, especially when the pipeline corridor crosses brooks and small rivers?
So part of the review process, so we'll start with the FERC process, is an extensive environmental review process. And I encourage anyone who wants to learn more about this process in detail at this early stage, go to ferc.gov. There's a lot of information there about the pipeline permitting and siting process. And you can review what's called a draft environmental impact statement for another project. All this is open information. You can see the level of environmental review that happens on a project like this. So the FERC will be compiling data. We'll file our application, will consist of a voluminous, what are called resource reports that will have lots of data about things like crossings, how we propose to cross river water bodies, for example. And we'll propose all of this, and then FERC will review it. Also the state of Massachusetts and the MEPA process, they're going to do review. So all these agencies will have sometimes concurrent reviews, sometimes independent reviews, public hearings, processes, lots of data collected, and they'll determine whether what we have proposed is permissible. They may modify it, adjust it, all towards what FERC is going to issue called a draft environmental impact statement. It's a public document that will take our resource reports, our application, and put it into a statement that they believe is appropriate for this project. So that's the review that will happen over roughly a 1.5-year period of compiling that information and putting it out to the public. Then that draft environmental impact statement will then be open for public comment and further review, leading towards what FERC staff issues then called a final environmental impact statement. And that statement will be what are the requirements for construction of this project, taking into account all of the environmental review that other agencies have done and the public comments that have been taken through the process, leading to a FERC certificate after that, as I mentioned at the beginning, voted on by the 5-member federal commission. So the review is extensive and lengthy, and we propose methods of construction on projects. We don't decide. That's up to the regulators to decide exactly how we do it.
Will any of this gas be exported out of the United States?
It's possible. We have, to determine whether or not a project like this is feasible, we're going to have firm contracts from reputable companies like local distribution companies in Massachusetts. So that's the core of a project like this being feasible. Local distribution companies are who delivers gas to customers in the region. Is it possible that some of this gas will make its way into a system that ultimately would be part of some export? It's possible. But a project like this can't move forward without the anchor pieces, or is it permittable without the anchor pieces, which are local distribution to customers in the New England region?
How does Kinder Morgan plan to reduce and/or eliminate natural gas leaks in their pipeline in order to prevent emissions from damaging the environment further?
Well, the way the lines are built, on a brand new pipeline, it's not, leaks are not common. The pipeline's put in, it's new steel, it's all controlled at the mill, all the welds are x-rayed and through the construction process. It's inspected, we've got a coating system on the pipeline, it's buried. At the valve locations, all the flanges and valves are tightened, so when we commission a pipeline, there are no leaks when the pipeline's commissioned. And then as the pipeline's maintained through the years, it's very seldom that there is leaks on the pipeline. So emissions from a leak, should there be a leak, is minor, that leak would be repaired. But we've not seen history of, we're not building a pipeline that leaks. It's, through the specifications and through things, we have gas accounted for and unaccounted for. So through the construction standards, through the design standards, leaks, if any, are very uncommon. And should there be a leak noticed or that would be repaired, so. I don't know if that answers it, but
What laterals are proposed west of the Nashua lateral?
If they're listed here. Nashua, Pittsburgh, Worcester.
Pittsburgh, Worcester.
Is there a lateral proposed possible in Warwick? No.
Not currently, no. Why? Well, if there were enough customer interest, we would build it. So the local distribution company, I know there's not gas service here currently. There would have to be a gas distribution company that would seek from us a certain capacity to distribute to customers. No one has come forward asking about that yet, but is it possible in the future that there will be additional laterals built on this pipeline? It's possible, but it's based upon those companies coming to us and seeking capacity on the line. That hasn't happened yet. So these laterals that are being looked at are coming from local distribution companies saying, we need additional capacity, can you build to this certain place so we can then distribute it to customers?
So you're looking for customers?
We are looking for customers.
Can you comment on your safety record in light of the Kinder Morgan accidental spill yesterday in South Carolina, as reported in the Wall Street Journal?
I don't have the specific details. There's a gasoline, I believe, in one of our terminal facilities in South Carolina, but I don't have the details on that. I can say that if we have any type of incident, there's a extensive reporting process that we do to regulatory agencies and typically put a plan together, do an investigation and what happened and a plan of how we can prevent those in the future. But beyond that, I really can't comment on that.
If you encounter ledge or rock during construction, will you use explosives?
yes, we will use a controlled blasting technique, a localized blasting to blast either the trench or the ledge. And don't think of it like a highway cut blasting. It's all controlled blasting. It's all drilled and planned with mats covering it. You're out there and you see it. It's more like a poof. It's not like where you see on TV in a mine where they're blowing off the side of a ledge. But yes, the only way you can trench, the primary way you can trench through these hard rock areas is through blasting technique. You'll trench, drill, cover it, and blast. So yes.
How many pipelines have you worked on, and what percentage did not get completed, and why not?
I think that's getting to the question about the FERC approval process and how many projects go through and are not approved by FERC. I can say and I can only speak for Kinder Morgan on this, is that why we take so much time at these early stages on projects, and why I'm telling you tonight that we haven't decided to pursue this project, is because if we do, we'll have the commercial interest necessary to pursue, and we'll be confident that this project can be permitted. How many projects have we not taken to that level? Hundreds. Never make it to that stage. But if we decide we're going to take one to FERC and file an application with them, we are 100% confident that that project will make it through the process, because we've done the preparation to get us through the process. But many, many projects, and hundreds is not an exaggeration by any means, never make it to that step of getting to the actual FERC process.
The rest of the question?
Where are compressor stations and storage fields proposed for this project?
So let's go back to our main map here. I'll talk about the compressors.
Yeah.
So currently, with this design of this project, we're talking about a compressor station in Wright and a compressor station in Dracut. and there are no storage components as part of this project.
What types of herbicide will be used, and will it be sprayed by airplane?
We don't use, and in relation to maintaining our rights of way, we do control the herbaceous growth because of access, well, the woody vegetation of the plants, because of access, maintenance, aerial surveillance, but we don't use herbicides. We control the vegetation by tractors, by brush hogs.
What impact does eminent domain have on the authority of the federal and state regulatory agencies?
So let's talk a bit about the process of eminent domain and how that's applicable to a project like this. So once the FERC completes its review, and if it determines that the project is in the public interest, and that's going through the 2-year process under the FERC voting, the presidential commissioners voting on the project, what is issued is called a certificate of public convenience and necessity. And that's, paraphrasing, that is determined that the project is in the public interest. If that is determined, then the company that is building the construction or building the project would have the power of eminent domain, being able to acquire property that it wasn't able to acquire. For us, and I think I certainly speak for our land agents, that's a last resort. It always is. And none of this applies unless the project is confirmed and supported by those policymakers. So we're going to work very hard in this process to reach an accommodation with landowners, and Jim, you may want to comment a little bit more about that process. But that is a acquisition process once the project is underway. What we're talking about now is a survey process. So you might want to talk a little bit about the survey and what we're currently doing and how we work with landowners on negotiation if we get to the easement process.
Sure, and as Alan said, right now, we're only interested in survey process on the property. There's no permanent rights. We're not asking or negotiating for rights of way. It's only to get on the property to do our studies. Now, if the project does go through and gets filed with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, the FERC, then we would come back knocking on your door. We would have plans, we would have documents, we would sit down at the kitchen table or out in the barn or wherever and talk about the project, help you understand how it would impact your property, identify your issues, how we can solve your issues. There would be compensation involved. That entire process would take as long as it needed to, hopefully to make you feel comfortable and satisfied. And then, and only then, and as the very last resort, if we couldn't work something out and there was no other alternative, then it would have to go to the courts. Definitely not our preference, definitely not what we want to do. Our goal is to work out an agreement with you through this acquisition process. And that's truly what we're interested in doing.
What is the usable lifetime of this pipeline?
Yeah, I mean, the pipelines, for example, the pipelines we've got on the southern system, the early ones were built in the 1950s, and they're maintained, and the integrity through our maintenance program, those are over 50 years old, and they're going to continue on working. So when we build a pipeline to last, to maintain it, and to last, I hate to use the word forever, but the way it's maintained, the way it's built, we don't design it and say, okay, it's a 20-year life, it's a 30-year life. It's put in the ground, it's maintained to have the service life for longer than any of our lives here, and probably longer than any of our children's lives. So it's a long-term program, and some of these lines, when you look at them after 50 years, you look inside them, you can still read the stencil of the mill that it came from. So the answer is it's built for a long life and maintained for that.
But if at the end of that long life it has to be removed, who's responsible for removing it?
It would be us.
Yeah.
And there's a process called an abandonment process. That's a regulated process, not dissimilar from the process of actually putting a pipeline in. So if we were to for whatever reason, choose to do that in the future, we would need to go through a regulatory process to do that with the firm.
What traffic could also be moved through such a pipeline?
Other product, this project is approved for natural gas distribution. Now, there are pipeline systems, we have some in the country that we have applied for the permitting process to change product. So it's possible that a pipeline that's carrying natural gas could, at least from a structural engineering perspective, transport another product. There would need to be modifications and compressor stations and pump stations, but we just simply can't do that. That has to be part of a regulatory process and approved by the regulators, particularly with the natural gas system, because that's a federally regulated project. You simply can't decide to take a FERC-regulated natural gas pipeline out of service, because part of their regulatory process is also determining supply. And is there enough supply to get to the distribution networks that we're providing to? So they're going to look at all of that. But there would be a regulatory process that we would need to go through if we were to be interested in doing that. Plus, you would have to have the customer base for that in the region as well. So it's a very similar process for constructing a new pipeline. It's not a dissimilar process, and it's not exactly the same, but it's a like process for changing product, abandoning, as though you were building a new pipeline.
What kind of tools or machinery is used during the survey?
It's hand tools. There's 3 types of surveys that are done on the property: civil, environmental, and archaeological. The archaeologists are professional contract company that are going to come in and literally use small hand tools and screen and sift the dirt and analyze every single piece that they find and categorize it and write their report. So that's kind of the archaeological. Then you have the environmental. And the environmental folks are going to be looking and characterizing the vegetation, the wetland parameters, stream parameters, and they would be generally using ribbons and taking notes. They're flagging the perimeters of possibly the wetlands or the streams. And the reason they're flagging it is because the civil survey folks are going to come through and put stakes for the center line and take measurements from that center line to the ribbons and the streams and the edge of roads and whatever improvement out there. Now, the one tool that the surveyors will use is to get line of sight. You're on an open pasture, they can sight all the way through. You're in a wooded forest, they're going to take their shot, but they may have to cut some limbs and to get their clear shot. And they would use a machete to cut those limbs. Or for instance, if it was in a lawn area, they would bend the branch out of the way. We're not going to cut any limbs in a lawn area. But as we're going through a forest, they'd have to cut a line of sight. So basically hand tools.
What steps are taken to prevent the ditch from draining a wetland?
Well, that goes back to what Alan was saying, when we work with the permit agencies, there's certain construction standards on how to build pipelines and what are accepted standards and practices that have been successful over the years. And then we start with that, and then there's, each agency may do others. But for example, in a wetland, when you construct it, you've got mats, and after you put the pipe in the wetland, you've got to put plugs on each side of the entry and entrance to the wetland. So where you've dug the trench through the wetland and disturbed that soil, you put your pipe in and you put trench breakers, which are basically sandbags. And that's one technique. There's several of them piled up, nice and secure and tight, so that it separates the wetland. That keeps any of the soils from going. And then when you backfill the upland, because of the technique and what causes a wetland, when you backfill the upland and the wetland and get your contours back together, you have to put it back at the same grade that it was, so that you don't have a drainage issue. So, and it's very close tolerance of how that's gone back. And there's a lot of, we could spend all night talking about wetland construction and the types, but that's probably one of the biggest focuses on the construction techniques is how you construct through wetlands, and there's several agencies from FERC to the Corps of Engineers to the local conservation commissions to the DEC that control the wetlands. But to keep it from draining is a matter of controlling the contour and putting your plugs in.
How are the pipes maintained?
There's several maintenance. One of the primary things when it's constructed, like I said, it has a coating system when it's new. And then what we do is if there's areas where there's possible coating damage when it was built or something, and then we put a cathodic protection system on there. And what it is really, you've got an anode, you've got an electrolysis system. So instead of the pipe, any kind of metal loss from the pipe, this electrolysis system controls that, so that doesn't happen. So that's one of the underground maintenance systems. The other thing is that when you're when maintaining them, you check every so often. You run smart tools through the pipe to make sure that there's no wall loss. You maintain your right of way and your easements, so you're controlling your easement that so there's no growth or houses or any third party on top of the pipeline. So there's patrols, there's cathodic surveys that we do to check the integrity of the pipe. There's internal tools that we run through to check the integrity of the pipe. But if it's constructed correctly and you maintain it correctly, there's really, other than the cathodic, you just monitor it and do your annual surveys and make corrections along the way.
What percent of the annual capacity of the pipe has been committed to as a result of the Kinder Morgan solicitation, and what percent of that is outside Massachusetts?
Well, I think that's referring to the open season that we went through earlier this year. What an open season is you put out to the market, this is our project, and you offer the opportunity for companies to reserve capacity on our line. And the answer to your question is 0. We don't have the commercial contracts from anyone yet from a signatory capacity for this project. And again, if we don't get there, we think we will get there, and we think we will get there soon, but if we don't, we will not construct the project.
When can one request pipeline route changes? What is the procedure and who should be contacted to do that?
That would be me, the land department. We have folks that are out here. Joe's with us this evening, and we would want to work with you to review and consider a route adjustment. We absolutely would do that, but we need your permission to get onto your property to go through that process. So it would be the land department, and if you need my contact, Mike's or Joe's, just see us after the meeting. We'd be happy to visit with you.
Does Kinder Morgan need to survey a certain percentage of the proposed properties before they can make the FERC application? And if so, what percentage?
Ideally, we would like to survey 100% of the properties because it gives us a more complete picture and a more thorough evaluation of the project. But there is a threshold, and I can't say what it is exactly, but there is an opportunity if we have less than 100% survey that we will continue to file. And on past projects, you don't always get 100% survey access up front, and it just you come back later and you've got to make some evaluations through aerial photography and through studies of what's on each side of the property. So it does not have to be 100% for us to make our FERC filing. But before it's constructed, there has to be 100%.
But it also works both ways, because if you have a piece of property that maybe has a rare species on it, some sensitive salamanders or turtles or whatever, it works for both of us, because we then would have the opportunity to learn about that, but you also would have the opportunity to learn about it, and we'd have to do mitigation or reroute or something. So it works both ways on whether permission is granted.
How much influence does community opposition to your planned pipeline have in your decision to go forward?
community input has a lot of input on this. And, you know, the conversations that I'm sure we'll have tonight after the meeting in a couple of days matter. The conversations that Jim and his land agents are having with landowners matter. We've had a number of follow-up meetings as a
We're
result
not
of
allowed
our...
to talk.
What?
We're not allowed to talk. We can't have a conversation with you.
You're not allowed to talk?
As a selectman.
It's gonna gavel.
Oh, after the meeting, we certainly can talk. So I encourage anybody who wants to ask questions following the meeting. We'll be hanging around here, be happy to converse, or you can set up meetings with our land agents privately anytime that you want. The process is very much attentive to public input, and this kind of dialogue is important. This is a participatory process. We learn a lot from these types of interactions, and the way that we can learn more and the way that we can adjust our project and potentially modify our project, particularly the routing piece, is by conversations. If folks won't talk to us, we won't know, and we're going to have to base our proposed route on the best information that we know. We've identified, I know Jim can identify hundreds of different things we've identified through this survey process that is helpful to us and has led to route modifications. We had a meeting earlier today in New Hampshire with a group that's concerned about some conservation lands and how we potentially are impacting those, and there are things we can do to impact that. But we had that meeting because they're willing to talk to us. And at the early stages of projects, that's the time to do it. Not when we already have a preferred route filed. You can still comment then, but the ability now, while we're still in full development of this route, and the project hasn't even been officially, is not officially moving forward yet, this is the time when we really have a lot of flexibility to listen to any and all concerns and try to take them into account. So we encourage the dialogue, and the participation by the community is very important. And not just to us, the regulators are going to take into account too. There's going to be public hearings and public testimony and public comment. And FERC, through its review process, is going to take those public comments. And if you make a comment, or a stakeholder, or the Board of Selectmen, or the state of Massachusetts makes a comment to these agencies, they're going to get a response, either directly from the agency or as part of the review process. So you're going to see that interest responded to. So we encourage participation, and if it doesn't happen tonight here, we encourage it throughout the process.
Kinder Morgan had open season to get possible customers for the proposed pipeline. Who responded to your open season notice, and who could be customers, and what generation plants?
So a number of companies responded. I think a representative example is the list that we provided on the previous slide. I can go back to it again, of our existing customers. Here we go. So a number of these customers have expressed interest before and during and since the open season process. But I'll emphasize again, we haven't signed any contracts yet. So once we do, and once we're comfortable that we have the contracts necessary for construction of a pipeline like this, and there is a process for that, we'll be public with the fact that we are moving forward, and there'll be a more clear identification then of whom our customers are, potential customers are. But for now, we don't have any to list because we don't have any secured contracts, but these are potential customers here.
How does building a pipeline only as far as Drake accommodate exporting?
How does, okay, let's look at our map. So we'll talk about Drake. Okay, so we are building roughly from the Ride area to the Drake area. And you can see Drake both from our system, this is the Algonquin system as well. Drake is a hub, if you will. There are other pipelines in the area, there are other ways to distribute gas. So when we're transporting gas, we are transporting, that is the scope of our project, to get gas delivery to Drake. Now, there will be gas going off of the line through these different laterals, these different smaller lines throughout it, but we are also delivering gas to Drake where it will be distributed to customers. So that's where our piece of the project ends, is there for distribution to Drake. Other customers will then take that gas and distribute it through their systems to different customer bases.
Is it true that the construction of this pipeline will be paid for by a tariff on customer electric bills?
No. No, that's not true. Our ability to transport natural gas is regulated by FERC. How much we can transport, the whole process, from inception of the project to restoration of the right-of-way when we're done, to the amount of money we can charge, which is called a tariff, to the companies who transport product in our line. We have no authority whatsoever over what local distribution companies charge their ratepayers. Now, does that mean that the gas distribution, the additional natural gas, is going to lower gas prices? We don't know that. If there's additional significant capacity in the area, it has the potential to do that. And some analysts have said, if you're bringing in a significant new gas supply, that's going to help the market, it's going to help stability, and potentially lower gas prices. And I know there's no natural gas delivery here, but from a gas perspective, the customers that are utilizing the gas, they are basing part of their decision-making process on the long-term supply issues here, so they can have the reliability. Is that going to make their ability to impact their ratepayers? That's their decision and their call. And I think it's far too early for anyone to suggest that the prices are going to go up or the ratepayers are going to be impacted. But that's a decision that the local distribution companies will make. Our position in the process is the transportation process, and what we charge, what we're able to charge as a tariff, is a federally regulated process.
I think you missed the question. Could you read it again, please? Could you read your question again, please? I think his answer was totally off in the other direction.
Is it true that the construction of this pipeline will be paid for by a tariff on customer electric
You're
bills?
not talking about your gas product, you're talking about the construction cost of the pipeline. It's been reported in the news that Massachusetts electric customers have been paying an increase in their energy rates to compensate Kinder Morgan construction costs. Can you comment on that, please?
Could you please hold your question until later?
Well, no, I was actually just paraphrasing your question.
Well, I think I did answer the question, but I'll shorten it up by simply answering no.
You said that in the beginning, then you went off on a tirade.
Well, I thought I answered the question, but I'll stop at no.
Thank you. What is the possible tax benefit to a town per mile of pipeline?
So we estimate for the state of Massachusetts an additional tax liability payable to taxing bodies that we pass through. So Warwick being the taxing body would be part of that, of about $25 million. So it's based upon how much the value of the asset is. So in this area, we're talking about a larger piece of pipe, probably a 30 or 36 inch, so that would be taxed. How much that's going to break out into each particular county or town and the boundaries of that, that's to be determined, but you can somewhat make an estimation of that based upon the $25 million through the state of Massachusetts. That'll all be according to the distribution formulas of the state.
It's now 8 o'clock. Do you wish to continue for a while, or?
That's fine.
Okay.
If you got more